Somewhere in the Black Sea, 35 kilometers off the coast of Ukraine, there sits an island, Snake Island. The island itself is a complete shithole and historically useless, but that doesn't really matter. What does matter is that this island belongs to Ukraine, and hypothetically, if Russian President Vladimir Putin ever wanted to, I don't know, invade Ukraine,
oh sweet God,
whoever controlled Snake Island would hold a considerable tactical advantage. February 20th, 2022, Moscow, Russia. Putin announces a special military operation in Ukraine. Aware of the island's strategic importance, Putin issues a side quest to his boys in the Russian Navy, a military effort to capture Snake Island. However, the previous year, after being constantly nagged by his advisors about the tactical nature of the island, Ukraine President and former Paddington Bear voice actor Volodymyr Zelensky visited the island himself and instantly fell in love, stating that Ukraine would defend it from the Russians with all their might. Things were about to get interesting. It's late February 2022. The Russian invasion has just begun, and a small group of only 13 Ukrainian border guards are stationed on Snake Island, nervously awaiting the Russian Navy. Tensions are high. Suddenly, a Ukrainian scout spots something sailing over the horizon, heading straight for them. Oh sweet Jesus. It's the Moskva. Now you have to understand, the Moskva wasn't just a warship. The Moskva was the flagship of the Russian Navy, and God, she was beautiful. That triple-tiered air defense system. Oh, those AK-630 machine guns. And don't even get me started on those 3D search radars. Essentially, it was the Death Star of warships. To say the Ukrainians were fucked would be an immense understatement. Now for anyone else, the mere sight of the Moskva would make them tremble in fear and dip immediately. But not the Ukrainians. Despite the overwhelming odds, they stood strong. To your battle stations, boys. As the Moskva approached, the ship contacted the Ukrainians via the radio and offered them an ultimatum. Either surrender or we'll light your sorry asses up. And it was at this point that 31-year-old Roman Highbrower had had enough. In the face of adversity, Roman recalled his younger days spewing verbal diarrhea in Modern Warfare 2 pre-game lobbies and readied himself to partake in the greatest IRL shit talk of all time. He equipped his 2010 Turtle Beach headset, then proceeded to utter the now iconic line, "Russian warship, go fuck yourself." But unfortunately for Roman, rather than receiving the customary racial and homophobic slurs in return, the Moskva instead bombarded their position. They never stood a chance, sadly resulting in all 13 reportedly dying in battle. Reportedly. But unbeknown to Roman at the time, his friend happened to be live streaming the entire affair on Facebook, and it was from here the video began to go viral. The entire internet went wild, and millions online celebrated the heroic defenders. In fact, people loved the video so much, they began making memes to immortalise the now iconic insult, and to farm Reddit karma. The defenders even gained the nickname, the Chads of Snake Island. The story of Snake Island went so viral, it quickly caught the attention of Zelensky himself, and the defenders were promptly awarded the title Hero of Ukraine, the country's highest military honour. However, unfortunately for Ukraine, Russia had in fact captured Snake Island. For now at least. As the weeks went by, it turned out, amidst all the shitposts and memes, was a metric shit ton of misinformation. We have journalists and war propaganda to thank for that. So allegedly, there were actually 82 Ukrainian soldiers in the island, not 13. Also, after the Moskva began to open fire, not wanting to be sent to the Shadow Realm, they all quickly surrendered and were taken captive. But our story's far from over. In fact, it only gets juicier from here. February 26th, 2022. The Russians had officially captured Snake Island, and the Ukrainians were really fucking annoyed. So embarrassing. Hundreds of years of getting bullied by the Russians, and now they've taken their island. Ukraine had finally had enough. They were out for revenge. Zelensky sought to do the impossible, recapture Snake Island, not for any strategic reason, but for the sole purpose of making the Russians look like a bunch of incompetent autists on a worldwide scale. But there was a massive problem. The Moskva, the warship, had been patrolling the waters around the island since its capture, rendering any attempt to recapture it, essentially, a suicide mission. They could send in drones, but the Moskva would simply shoot them down. But luckily for Zelensky, it turned out that the Moskva was a complete piece of shit. Yeah, Despite Russian propaganda, the ship barely worked and was in terrible condition. See that air defense system? Doesn't work. That badass cannon? Broken. The watertight doors? Completely fucked. Zelensky proposed a plan. How about we just launch loads of missiles at it all at once? Maybe? And that's exactly what they did. The missiles were fired, quickly overwhelming the ship's dodgy air defences, causing 2 of them to hit their target. On April 14th, 2022, the Moskva was destroyed. To add insult to injury, hundreds of meme enthusiasts booted up MS Paint and began pumping out memes mocking the ship's demise. Of course, Russia did their best to refute these claims, but they weren't fooling anyone. With Russia's beloved Moskva now laying at the bottom of the Black Sea, Ukraine were finally able to send in them drones. Send a supply boat to the island. Go for a morning walk. Essentially, without the Moskva's protection, Russian soldiers deployed in the island were sitting ducks, with Ukraine's drones making their lives absolutely miserable. And on June 30th, 2022, after suffering constant attacks, they had finally had enough, and the Russians left Snake Island. It had been 5 long, painful months, but now, the island could finally be recaptured. But unfortunately, this was way easier said than done. You see, although the Russians had left the island, their ships still patrolled the nearby waters. Zelensky pondered, how about we just drop a fat nuke on them?
But sir, that's a fucking war crime.
Then someone else think of a better idea. Ukraine's best military analysts got to work, designing one of the most tactically genius military operations of all time. Sneak onto the island, raise the Ukraine flag as a sign of superiority, then get the fuck out. Yes, that was the actual plan, and they even had a date, July 7th, 2022. Under the cover of darkness, a small group of Ukrainian Spetsnaz soldiers hopped onto their underwater whips and began to make the 35-kilometer journey to the island. Not as fun as it looks though, because before leaving, the Russians riddled the island with underwater mines. In fact, it had taken so long to navigate through the mines that by the time they had actually arrived on the island, the sun had begun to rise. They no longer had the cover of darkness and were now easy targets. But there was no turning back. This had to be quick. They rushed ashore, flag in hand. The tension was palpable. One wrong move would be enough to alert the nearby Russian Navy, who would immediately open fire. But so far, so good. Then suddenly, spotted. Russia's patrol boats began to open fire, bombarding the island with countless shells. But the flag had finally been raised. It was time for the Ukrainians to bounce. They began weaving in and out of Russian fire, desperate to escape the island. Some of them made it, but sadly, an unspecified number of Ukrainian soldiers were killed whilst attempting to flee. And that's sad and all, but the Ukraine flag was now flying high on Snake Island for the first time in 5 months. They had done it. They had recaptured Snake Island, and in the process, humiliated Putin's Russia on a worldwide scale.
My bro, Snake Island is ours.
After hearing the good news, the commander of Ukraine's armed forces immediately went to shitposting on Twitter to deliver a message to the entire world. Despite overwhelming odds, they had done it. Snake Island was once again under Ukraine control,